Greetings viewers, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're back on my brother's 2011 Outback 2.5i Limited. In previous videos, we did some work on the CVT, the failed valve body, replaced that, and soon to replace the failed torque converter. But when I test drove the car initially in this video up here, I noted I heard a very bad driveline sound like a rear wheel bearing, and my suspicions are correct. The rear passenger wheel bearing is failed. Checked it just the other day when I got this car jacked up and getting it set to do the transmission work. So we've got a new genuine rear wheel and hub assembly here from Subaru, and we're gonna go ahead and swap that out today. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I'm not sure how well this is gonna come through on the microphone and the camera, but it's pretty simple to figure out if you have a noisy wheel bearing most times. When they get really bad, you get play in them. This one has just the barest little bit of play. Can't really show you that on camera, but if you shake the wheel top and bottom and side to side and you feel movement, likely bad wheel bearing. So we're gonna spin this by hand and you're gonna listen. There's a little bit of brake noise, but you'll hear the wheel bearing itself making noise and grinding as well on top of the brake noise. That high-pitched kind of tinging sound is brake noise, but that low rumble, that is the wheel bearing. So let's go ahead and take care of this. I'm gonna start by removing our wheel and tire, 19mm lugs. All right, next thing we're gonna need to do is get the brake assembly out of the way. We're gonna need to remove our brake caliper bracket, and the brake rotor. Then we're gonna need to remove our 32mm CV axle nut. 14mm bolts for the caliper bracket. We also have, I believe, a 10 or 12mm bolt here for the brake line that holds it to the rear spindle. A 12mm headed bolt back here on the brake line bracket. Pull that out of the way so you can get the brake line loose. Move the caliper more freely. Can remove that lower 14mm bolt for the caliper bracket. I can move the brake caliper bracket and all as an assembly and secure it on either a brake hook, some mechanics wire, something to hold it up and keep it from hanging by the brake line. You don't want to put that stress on your brake line. So we'll just hook it back here, let it hang off of our spring stirrup just to get it out of the way. Now we need to remove the brake rotor. It may be necessary to remove this here cover and back the star wheel adjuster back for the inside parking brake shoes. Down at the bottom, but likely it's just a little stuck on there. You can run 2 bolts in here to pull that off of that hub. Your brake line hold down bolt is the correct pitch bolt for this. All you northern viewers are gonna hate my guts at this rust-free Southern car and how most of this stuff's just gonna fall right apart without any hold-up, even though it's an 11-year-old vehicle. So use that bolt, pull the rotor off, didn't have to mess with the parking brake adjuster. Set that to the side. Now this is free, I can go ahead and remove that CV axle nut. Like so. There is, I believe, a 10mm headed bolt directly at the back. You'll see attached to the end of this wire for the ABS wheel speed sensor. Remove that bolt, remove the ABS wheel speed sensor. As you don't want to damage that sensor when you are pulling the hub bearing assembly out of the spindle. Be careful popping that sensor up. It is plastic and you can easily break it. Most of them will be rusted in the north, so again, be careful with that. All right, now that that's all out of the way, all that really remains is seeing if our CV axle is free from the hub and removing the 4 bolts that are on the back side that hold the hub assembly into the spindle. I believe they are 14mm headed bolts, and that they are. So let's go ahead and break those loose. Sorry guys, I'm not showing you the back side here, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Just to give you guys a shot of what I'm doing back here, that's the 2 top bolts and the 2 bottom bolts, 14mm for that wheel hub bearing assembly. Pretty easy to access based upon the description given of what you're going to find back there. So again, 4 14mm headed bolts back here holding the hub bearing assembly in place. That's what they look like. First one out. And the last one out. So now you can just pull it out by hand if you're in the South. I'm sure again, all of you are cussing me because of how easy that fell out. And we'll push our CV axle back through the center. Might be a little stuck, might need to tap it with a hammer and a punch just to free it up, but shouldn't be too terrible to dislodge. Well, for me at least. All right guys, so hopefully just a couple taps of the hammer. Normally you don't want to do this. You don't want to mushroom out the end of the CV axle. Normally you'd put a punch in the dimple here, but I don't think I'm gonna have to give it very much to get it loose, so. Yep, only a couple little small taps. So just be mindful of the backing plate for your parking brake as we pull the wheel bearing hub assembly out of there. I'm gonna set that aside. We're gonna go ahead and grab our new one. Nothing really to clean up in here. It's all rust free, just a little bit of surface rust, but again, 2011, 2021, 10-year-old vehicle. And clean and rust free, and I know y'all are hating me because of how easy I just made that look. Again, I know most of you are gonna have to beat and torch this thing. A lot of guys up north on the Subaru technicians page, there's hub shockers, all kind of stuff you got to do to get these things out because they get seized in there really bad in northern areas. But luckily us southern guys can knock a wheel bearing out in like 20-30 minutes, if even that. So new assembly's in. We'll go ahead and run our 4 14mm headed bolts back in, and we'll get the torque wrench out and torque them to specification. So before we go too far, let's look at our old wheel bearing. Let's take a listen to this. I'll hold it up to the mic. Absolutely was the source of our noise. I'm gonna go back and forth, crisscross, make sure you get it even. Don't want it to go in there sideways. Not likely that that'll happen, but it can. That's why the service manual mentions that you always want to take a dial indicator and check run out. Make sure that it's running true before you put it back into service. But you don't want that thing rotating crooked sideways, which can happen if the flange is not flush against the spindle. Nice, quiet, and smooth. All right, now we can torque those 4 14mm headed bolts to 65 Newton meters. And that's set. Grab and install a new CV axle nut, Subaru part number 902170049. Install that and tighten it temporarily before our final torquing. That's set. Eyeball our run out. Looks pretty close to me. Now, without being rusty and crusty, I don't think I really got to worry about any issues there. Reinstall our brake disc. Reinstall our cover. We didn't really need to replace or remove. Reinstall the brake caliper and brake caliper bracket. Torque those bolts to 66 Newton meters. Reinstall the ABS wheel speed sensor and tighten the 10mm headed bolt. As far as the 10mm headed bolt and the bore for the ABS wheel speed sensor, that's located here. And that 12mm headed bolt for the brake line bracket goes here. Reinstall the 12mm headed bolt for the brake line bracket, like so. Now it's time to torque your CV axle nut to 240 Newton meters. You're gonna need an assistant to hold the brake pedal while doing so. Because these rear discs are non-ventilated, you can't just stick a screwdriver in there and lock the hub. And again, 240 Newton meters. Hopefully the brakes will hold that. Not quite, we're getting to 202 Newton meters. I don't have anyone with me. I'm using a stick to depress the brake pedal. Let me see if I can tighten it up. All right, let's see if that helps us out. Parking brake is now set as well as the brake pedal is depressed. Hopefully that's enough to get us to our target torque. And there we go, 240 Newton meters, barely. On the dot. So now we can go ahead and stake our new CV axle nut to our axle. Which honestly could use a good detailing and a wash. The car is filthy. All right, torque wrench is set to 120 Newton meters. And we're done with this repair. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.